Some sewing tips are very small and very niche, and because of that they're not often talked about. In this video I want to share 5 very helpful tips that you may not have heard before. So let's start on how to match a serger seam, especially at the armholes. Whenever we're sewing woven fabrics, matching seams is very simple. You match 2 layers and make sure that the seams are matching. Then you put a pin at the seam allowance line right through the middle of both seams. You sew with a straight stitch and you get a perfectly matched seam. However, when we're serging and when we're sewing knit fabrics, we cannot pin and sew because you should never serge over pins. And also because of the way the serger works, the 2 layers may shift very slightly when sewing, creating that annoying 1 mm seam mismatch. Now, lucky for us, there's quite an easy solution to this problem. So first, I want you to go ahead and match the seam at the armpits. In this part, to create less bulk at the armpit, I like to push one serger seam to one side and another to the other side. This way, at the seam connection line, I get less bulk. Now go ahead and put a pin right through the seam connection at the seam allowance line. At the sewing machine, sew a few centimeters before the seam connection and a few centimeters past the seam connection. Don't worry if your sewing machine is threaded with a different color thread, because this is only a temporary stitch which we will be able to remove later on. After this step, your armpit seams should be perfectly matched, and now you can start serging. When you're serging and you're moving closer to the armhole seam connection, I want you to go ahead and serge so that the left needle is going right through the seam that we made on a sewing machine. This way you ensure that you keep that perfectly matched seam. And this is it, you have perfectly matched the serger seam at the armpit. Try this tip next time you're working with knit garments such as t-shirts or sweatshirts. So this next tip is very simple and very easy. Whenever you're sewing t-shirts or sweatshirts and you have a rounded collar or you have a U-shape collar, you have a strap that has a seam connection. Now, for the very long time, I used to position that seam connection at the back center line. This is how it's usually suggested in the patterns. However, I have noticed that it creates a very visible part where the collar ends meet. So I've started analyzing ready-made garments and see how they position the collar strap in the ready-made garments. And to make that seam connection less noticeable, they don't position it at the center of the back. Instead, they position it about 1 centimeter past the shoulder at the back side. This way the seam connection is almost unnoticeable, and because we're not pinning it directly to the shoulder seam but 1 centimeter past the shoulder seam, we don't create excess bulk. This is a wonderful way how to position the colors, and once I learned it, this is always how I position my colors on t-shirts or sweatshirts. Third tip is how to cut knit fabrics. So cutting knit fabrics is a little bit trickier than cutting woven fabrics. And in particular, the trickiness is in positioning the fabric. So when you're working with knit fabric, this is a rib knit fabric. This is a very good example because it has a very clear columns. So whenever you have knit fabric, you have one column going all along the fabric. So when you're preparing your knit fabric for cutting and you need to fold it, I want you to go ahead and fold it so that at the fold, you always have that one column running throughout the fold. Depending on the knit type, this column will be less or more noticeable. If you're working with very fine t-shirt fabric, this column will be very tricky to see, but if you pay very close attention, you will see that there's one vertical column running all through the fabric. If you fold it right at that one vertical line, you will ensure that you cut your knit fabrics based accordingly to the grain line. And grain line is very important when whenever you're cutting garments, because if the grain line is not followed, the garment will wear out differently than supposed to based on the pattern. For example, most likely you had a t-shirt at least once in your life where the side seam starts to spin around the body, and this happens because the pattern is most likely cut off grain. And using this tip of cutting fabric, knit fabric, fold it right along that one vertical line will help you find a true grain line and properly cut your garment. If you're looking for a project where to apply all these first 3 tips, I have recently created a t-shirt design and sew course. This is my very first course where I show how to create your pattern and sew t-shirts using professional techniques. The pattern making method that I show in the course is very simple. I show different fit variations, I show different color variations and different hem variations. Using the techniques shown in the course, you will be able to create your perfect t-shirt that are designed for your figure and according to your fit preferences. Once you try out wearing the t-shirt that are made specifically for your figure, you will see how comfortable it is, and it will be very difficult to wear any other t-shirt later on. I've been wearing the t-shirt that I made specifically for my own figure non-stop, and it's hands down the most comfortable t-shirt I ever owned. If you're interested in creating your own t-shirt pattern and sew it using professional techniques, I will link the course in the description box down below. This next tip is very simple and very easy. Whenever you're washing multiple new fabrics, or if you're washing printed fabrics, add 1 sheet of color catcher inside the washing machine. So I started doing this a few years back. I bought this very beautiful fabric that had red and white stripes. When I went ahead and washed the fabric for the very first time, that red color bled into the water and dyed the white straps. And it didn't ruin completely the fabric, but it did change how the fabric looks. This could have very easily been prevented had I used a color catcher. Color catchers are created from a very absorbent material, so whenever the dyes bleed into the water, it absorbs all that dyes and protects the other fabrics from coloring. Now, of course, not all fabrics will release the color, but it's better be safe than sorry. So whenever I'm washing multiple fabrics at the same time, or whenever I'm washing fabric that has print or stripes, I just use one of the color catcher sheets and I had 0 issues. Fifth and final tip is that different fabrics have different sun protection levels. I have to admit, until very recently, I didn't even think about it, but now that I know, I want to share it with you as well in case you are not aware of this. So whenever you're choosing a sunscreen, you have the SPF rating system, which shows how well the cream protects from sun and UV light. In apparel and in fabrics, instead of SPF, we have UPF rating. Very similarly to SPF, the higher the number, the better protection you get. UPF rating is very rarely shown on the fabrics whenever you're buying them. However, there are a few indications that will allow you to choose fabric that has better UPF protection level. So a few rules to remember is that darker colors will protect better than light fabrics. More dense weaves will protect better than looser weaves. And synthetic fabrics like polyester or nylon will protect better than natural fibers. So for example, if you're buying t-shirt and it's white cotton t-shirt made from very lightweight cotton, it will not have a very good UPF rating. And if you want to create garments that have very good protection from sun, I recommend looking for fabrics that have UPF rating 50+. For example, here I have the lycra fabric. You can see that it's very dense lycra fabric. This fabric, specifically when I was buying it, it had UPF rating of 50+. So if you want to create garments that have very good sun protection, I would recommend either following the 3 rules that I mentioned or looking for fabrics that have specifically UPF rating mentioned and the rating is 50 plus. So here are all 5 tips I wanted to share in today's video, and I hope you enjoyed learning these tips. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye!